They say love can heal even the deepest wounds. But what happens when love isn't enough? 5 years ago, I walked into a man's life thinking I could be his second chance at happiness. I never imagined I'd become the outsider in my own home. What went wrong? And why did I finally say it was too late to save our marriage? I met James 5 years ago, during a season of grief and transition. He had lost his first wife the previous year, leaving him to care for their 2 young children, Lily and Max, who were just 4 and 2 at the time. Our connection was immediate, rooted in shared experiences of loss and a mutual desire for companionship. Our early days were filled with cautious optimism. We took things slowly, mindful of the delicate dynamics at play. After 7 months of dating, I met Lily and Max. The introduction was gentle, and the children in their innocence welcomed me without hesitation. I was relieved and hopeful, believing that love and patience would guide us through. However, not everyone shared our enthusiasm. James's late wife's family expressed discomfort with my presence, fearing that I might replace the children's mother. James assured me that their concerns would fade over time, attributing their reactions to grief and protectiveness. I chose to trust him, focusing instead on nurturing our budding family. 2 years ago, James and I married. I embraced my role as a stepmother with open arms, dedicating myself to creating a loving and stable home. Initially, things seemed to progress smoothly. The children adjusted, and we found a rhythm that worked for us. But as time passed, subtle shifts began to emerge. The children became more resistant to my guidance, often challenging my authority. James, once attentive and supportive, grew distant, dismissing my concerns as overreactions. I felt increasingly isolated, bearing the weight of parenting without the partnership I had anticipated. When I became pregnant with our son, I hoped it would unite us further. James was thrilled, but Lily and Max reacted with indifference, even hostility. I tried to understand their feelings, acknowledging the complexities of blending families. Yet again, James remained disengaged, offering little support as tensions escalated. The situation deteriorated further when James began delegating responsibilities to me, including interactions with his late wife's family. Their coldness and veiled criticisms added to my stress, and James's indifference left me feeling abandoned. The children, influenced by external narratives, began to reject me openly, questioning my role in their lives. Despite my efforts to foster connection and understanding, the emotional distance widened. I suggested family counseling, hoping to address the underlying issues, but James dismissed the idea, insisting that time would heal all wounds. His inaction spoke volumes, reinforcing the sense that I was alone in this journey. The birth of our son brought joy, but also intensified the existing fractures. Lily and Max showed little interest in their new sibling, and James continued to sidestep the growing discord. I felt like an outsider in my own home, striving to keep the peace, while my own needs went unmet. A close friend, who had navigated similar challenges, offered a sobering perspective. She emphasized the importance of mutual effort in blending families, and warned against the toll of one-sided compromises. Her words resonated deeply, prompting me to reevaluate my circumstances. I realized that without James's active participation and support, our family could not thrive. The love I had poured into our relationship was not enough to bridge the gaps created by neglect and avoidance. It was a painful acknowledgement, but a necessary one. After much contemplation, I made the difficult decision to leave. I packed my belongings and our son's essentials, seeking refuge with my parents. The move was both heartbreaking and liberating, marking the end of a chapter filled with unmet expectations and emotional exhaustion. James's initial disbelief gave way to promises of change, but his words felt hollow, arriving too late to mend the damage done. Even his parents, previously distant, urged me to reconsider, emphasizing the children's need for stability. But I knew that staying would only perpetuate the cycle of hurt. In choosing to leave, I prioritized my well-being and that of my son. It was a step towards healing, a declaration that love should not come at the expense of self-worth. While the journey ahead remains uncertain, I carry with me the strength forged through adversity and the hope for a more fulfilling future. When I first moved in with James, I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I didn't know how lonely I could feel in a house full of people. I thought, naively, that with time, love, and effort, the kids would grow to accept me. After all, I wasn't trying to replace their mother. I was simply trying to love them and offer a stable, nurturing home. But what I didn't understand then was this: you can't build something lasting if the foundation is already cracked, and no one wants to help fix it. Lily and Max had been kind at first. Not warm, not affectionate, but polite. Civil. That changed slowly, then all at once. After I got pregnant, they began to ignore me. Then came the pushback. When I asked them to help around the house, even something small like setting the table, they'd roll their eyes or simply walk away. I tried not to take it personally. I reminded myself they were kids, grieving and adjusting. But when Max shouted, "You're not my mom. You don't get to tell me what to do," something in me broke a little. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the fact that James was standing right there, and he said nothing. Not a word. That silence was louder than any insult. I brought it up with James that night. I told him I felt disrespected, isolated, undermined. He shrugged and said, "They're still adjusting. It'll pass." And that was it. That was his answer. Always. It'll pass. It didn't. Worse, it started to escalate. The kids would come home from visiting their maternal grandparents and look at me with cold, assessing eyes, like they were waiting for me to mess up. And when I did anything they didn't like, they'd parrot back the exact same phrases. "She's not your mom. Don't let her control you. She's trying to steal you." One day, Max, barely 6 at the time, called me a dumb bitch to my face when I asked him to take his dishes to the sink. I was 7 months pregnant. I sat down on the couch and cried, not because of what he said, but because I knew exactly where he learned those words. I told James. He looked uncomfortable. He muttered something about talking to them, but he never did. Or if he did, it didn't matter. Nothing changed. Worse still, James began retreating from parenting entirely. Whenever a problem came up, behavior, schoolwork, emotional outbursts, he'd pass it off to me. "Can you handle it?" he'd say. "You're good with them." That wasn't a compliment. That was an escape route. I started to feel like a live-in nanny with no authority. I cooked. I cleaned. I helped with homework. I drove them to school and back. I went to parent-teacher meetings alone, and the more I did, the more invisible I became to him. He'd come home from work, kiss me on the cheek, pat my stomach, then go straight to his room or plop down in front of the TV. If I tried to talk, really talk, he'd sigh, glance at the clock, and say, "Can we not do this right now?" So many right nows passed. I forgot what an actual conversation had felt like. I reached out to a therapist. Alone, at first. Then I gently suggested marriage counseling. He said, "We don't need therapy. We just need a break from all the stress." But the stress wasn't the problem. It was the neglect. It was the refusal to act. It was the lack of accountability, of unity, of respect. The day our son was born, I felt something I didn't expect. Fear. Fear that this innocent baby, this beautiful, healthy boy I loved instantly, would grow up surrounded by resentment, conflict, and silence. I held him and whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. That he would always feel safe, always feel seen, always feel loved. That night, when we came home from the hospital, Lily slammed her door and refused to come out. Max called his grandmother and cried on the phone. I heard her through the receiver, calling me a homewrecker, a manipulator, a parasite. James didn't defend me. He never did. In the weeks that followed, it became routine. The kids ignored me, Or worse, they made snide comments about the baby. They refused to help, and sometimes even tried to wake him on purpose when I finally got him to sleep. They said they hated me. They said I ruined everything. James said, "They're just kids." I said, "They're also hurting. We need help." He said, "You're overreacting." I said, "I'm drowning." He said, "Things will get better." I said, "When?" He had no answer. It was my friend, Sarah, who finally broke through to me. I knew she was right. I'd known it for a long time. But hearing it out loud, spoken with love, but without sugarcoating, shook me. I had become someone I didn't recognize. I was exhausted, anxious, always on edge. I cried in the shower, in the car, even while feeding the baby. I'd stopped dreaming about the future. I was just surviving the present. I gave James one last chance, one last plea. I said, "I am asking you, for the last time, to come with me to counseling. To stand beside me, not behind me, not in silence. Because if you won't fight for this family, I won't keep pretending that I can save it alone." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "I think you're being dramatic. Things will calm down." That was it. The final blow. I left 3 days after Christmas. I packed one suitcase for me and one for our son. I took his baby blanket, his bottles, the stuffed elephant he loved. I left a note. Not angry, just honest. "I tried," I wrote. "I really, truly tried. And James didn't believe I'd go. But I did. And for the first time in years, I felt clarity. He started texting a week later, then calling, then begging. "Let's work it out," he said. "We can fix this. Don't give up on us." His parents called too, suddenly full of concern. "You're the only mother figure they have," they said. "You can't do this to the children." But no one had cared when I was breaking down silently in that house. No one had offered support when I was pouring every ounce of myself into a family that saw me as an intruder. Where was that urgency before? And still, part of me wanted to believe him. To believe that maybe he would change. That maybe all those nights of crying and praying and hoping hadn't been for nothing. But I had changed. I wasn't the same woman who walked into his life 5 years ago, full of hope and willingness to carry everyone's emotional burdens. Now, I'm a mother who understands that my son deserves peace. That I deserve peace. So when James said, "It's not too late," I looked him in the eyes and said gently, but with finality, "It is for me." There's a strange quiet that follows leaving. Not the peaceful kind. Not at first. It's the kind of quiet that presses on your chest, making you question if you did the right thing, even when every part of your spirit knows you did. The morning after I moved into my parents' house, I woke up to the soft gurgles of my son, lying beside me in his bassinet. It was 5:12 a.m., still dark outside. My body was sore, my eyes puffy from crying, but in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Safety. No footsteps down the hall. No slammed doors. No cold stares. No silence that stung like a slap. Just me and my son. Breathing. Existing. Free. But freedom comes with its own weight. I wasn't just grieving a marriage. I was grieving the idea of what I thought my life would be. I had pictured birthday parties with all the kids playing together, Sunday mornings in pajamas making pancakes, and a partner who'd have my back no matter what. Instead, I found myself holding a baby with one arm while writing legal documents with the other, preparing for divorce. My parents were supportive, though not without concern. My mother kept asking if I was sure, not because she didn't believe me, but because she knew what came next. The hard part wasn't leaving. It was staying gone. It was walking away from the hope that he'd finally change. It was holding your ground when the tears and promises come rolling in. And they did. James started calling daily, then texting, then emailing. Long, rambling paragraphs about how sorry he was, how he'd been blind, how he missed me, how the kids missed me. He even started talking about therapy. "I'm ready now," he said. "It took you leaving for me to see what I've lost." I wish I could say I was unmoved, but that would be a lie. I read those messages late at night, after putting our son to sleep. Tears streaming down my face. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love was enough, that all those years and all those tears hadn't been for nothing. But then I remembered all the nights I cried alone, the times I begged for help, the moments the kids repeated things their grandmother said while he looked the other way. I remembered how invisible I had become in my own home. Love, I realized, isn't just about staying. It's about showing up. Every day. Especially when things are hard. And James hadn't shown up. So, I didn't answer. Not at first. I let the silence speak for me. For once. Instead, I focused on healing. The first step was therapy. Not for my marriage. For me. I found a counselor who specialized in blended families and trauma recovery. In our first session, I sat on the couch and sobbed like a child. I told her everything. Things I hadn't even admitted to myself out loud. How I felt like a failure. How I resented Lily and Max, but also mourned the bond we never got to build. How guilty I felt for bringing my son into a fractured home. How I didn't know who I was anymore. She listened without judgment. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You didn't fail them. You stayed longer than most people would have. That's not failure. That's bravery." I carried those words with me into every long night, every anxious morning, every quiet feeding session with my son. Slowly, I started to feel more like myself again. Not the woman I was before James, but someone new. Someone stronger, wiser, quieter maybe, but more grounded. I also started setting boundaries. When James asked to visit our son, I agreed, but only on neutral ground, and only after he met with a family therapist. At first, he pushed back. He said I was punishing him. I calmly explained that this wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. For me. For our son. For his own growth, if he was really serious about it. To my surprise, he went. He didn't transform overnight, but he started showing up differently, asking questions, owning mistakes, listening more than talking. And yet, I still didn't go back, because change isn't just about saying the right things, it's about sustaining them over time. I needed to see who he'd become when no one was watching. Meanwhile, life on my own was hard, but healing. I returned to part-time work remotely. My parents helped when they could. I took walks with my son every morning, watched him giggle at birds and trees and puddles. I started cooking again, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. I read books that had been gathering dust for years. I called old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in what felt like forever. And the more distance I had, the more clearly I saw the truth. I hadn't left too soon. I had waited too long. There were moments of doubt, of course, especially when Lily and Max were brought up. I often wondered if I'd failed them. Could I have done something differently? Was I too stern? Not patient enough? Was I wrong to try to love them like my own when they never wanted that? But then I remembered. I wasn't their problem. I was their scapegoat. They were grieving. They were confused, and instead of helping them process that pain, the adults in their lives weaponized it. They made me the villain because it was easier than facing their own fears and failures. And James let it happen. That's not something love can fix. Not alone. Now, I'm not bitter. I'm just honest. I still believe in love. I still believe in family. I still believe that people can change, but only if they want to, and not because someone begged them to, And most importantly, I believe that walking away was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a better one. One where my son will grow up in a home filled with honesty, laughter, and warmth. One where I model strength, not sacrifice. One where love doesn't come with silence, resentment, or fear. James continues to be involved with our son. He's doing the work now, maybe for real this time. I don't know what the future holds for him, or for us as co-parents. But I know this: I gave my heart. I gave my time. I gave everything I had. And when that still wasn't enough, when it threatened to break me, I walked away. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did. It's strange how quiet healing is. You imagine it will be loud, marked by big moments, sweeping gestures, sudden awakenings. But it's not. Healing comes in whispers, in soft mornings when your son sleeps in, and the house is warm and still, in realizing you didn't cry today, in noticing the color of the leaves again, and remembering how much you loved autumn before everything fell apart. It's been over a year since I left James, and in many ways, that year has been the hardest and most honest of my life. There are no trophies for surviving heartbreak, no medals for choosing yourself. People don't line up to cheer you on when you're folding laundry alone after putting a toddler to bed. But every night that I fell asleep knowing I was no longer living in silence, no longer shrinking myself to keep the peace, that was a quiet kind of victory. I started writing again. Journals, mostly. Letters I never sent. Pages filled with things I wished I had said, and things I was glad I didn't. I wrote about the little moments, my son's first steps, his first real laugh, the way he sleeps with one hand tucked under his cheek, like a prayer. These were the things that reminded me why I left. Not out of anger, but out of love. For him. For me. I also redefined my relationship with James. We were no longer husband and wife, but we were co-parents. And like it or not, that meant we still had to communicate. The boundaries were clear now. Everything went through a co-parenting app, not text. I stopped responding to emotional appeals. I stuck to logistics. When he slipped back into old patterns, minimizing, deflecting, I didn't engage. I didn't explain. I didn't try to fix it. I let him take responsibility. And slowly, he started to. To his credit, he kept up with therapy. He showed up to his scheduled visits. He asked questions about our son's routines, his needs. He apologized. Not just once, but consistently, in small ways. Not to win me back, but to finally show up for the family he'd nearly lost. And that was when something unexpected happened. Lily and Max began to shift too. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, I assumed they'd never want anything to do with me again. But healing, like I said, is quiet. It started with a drawing. Max had come over with James to pick up his baby brother for a Saturday visit. While James was strapping the car seat in, Max lingered by the door. Then, shyly, he handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a picture of our son. Stick figure, wild crayon colors, but unmistakably him. And in the corner, he had written, "I'm sorry I was mean to you." My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know what to say. I just hugged him, gently, and said, "Thank you for this. It means a lot." That night, I cried, but not from pain. From relief. That was the first crack in the wall. Over time, there were more. Lily, who had once glared at me with eyes full of betrayal, now made casual eye contact when we exchanged the boys. Eventually, she stayed behind on the porch one evening and asked, out of nowhere, "What was he like as a baby?" I smiled. Loud, strong, and really stubborn. She laughed. Just a little. But it was the first time I'd heard her laugh in my presence in years. The truth is, kids remember more than we think. but they also feel more than they can say. Lily and Max had every reason to be confused, angry, and hurt. They lost a mother. They felt abandoned. Then they watched their dad move on too fast, too recklessly, and with too little care for the emotional wreckage. I tried to carry that wreckage alone, and it nearly broke me. But time has a way of softening edges when space is given for it, when blame stops being the currency, when adults take accountability. I've since had several conversations with Lily and Max. Nothing dramatic, no movie moment apologies, but moments of clarity. I told them I never wanted to replace their mom, that I only ever wanted to be someone who cared about them, and I told them I was sorry they were hurt, even if it wasn't all my fault, because that's what healing asks of us, not to carry the blame, but to own our part with compassion. Now they ask about their little brother. They even babysit sometimes when James picks him up. And once, Lily left a note in his bag. "Tell Mom I said hi," and that word, Mom, hit me like a wave. It wasn't a title I needed from her, but knowing that she saw me, even just a little, meant everything. Through all of this, I found myself again. I started running in the mornings. I took up painting. I enrolled in an online course just because I could. My friendships deepened. I hosted small dinners. I bought a secondhand bookshelf and filled it with novels I hadn't touched in over a decade. I took long walks with my son, where we talked about clouds and bugs and made up stories about dragons who love tea. And maybe most importantly, I learned to love gently myself first. There were moments I thought I'd never trust again, never risk again. But healing doesn't mean swearing off hope. It just means walking into love with open eyes. I did meet someone. Much later. A friend who became more. No fairy tale, just something quiet and kind. He knows my story, all of it, and he respects it. He knows I don't need saving. I just need honesty. We're taking it slow, not because I'm afraid, but because I'm finally whole. And I won't rush anything that risks unraveling that. If you had told me 3 years ago that this is where I'd be now, standing on my own, co-parenting peacefully, reconnecting with children who once hated me, I wouldn't have believed you. But here I am. Not the woman who endured, but the woman who grew, who chose peace over performance, who walked away, not because she didn't love, but because she finally learned how to love herself. There's a quote I came across recently that stopped me in my tracks. It read, "Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing yourself over what hurts you." I reread it 3 times, because that was it. That was the truth I'd been walking toward, slowly, painfully, but intentionally. Letting go of James wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about ending the pattern I had accepted for years. Putting myself last, excusing silence, justifying emotional absence, absorbing other people's pain, without ever tending to my own. It took leaving to learn how deeply I had abandoned myself while trying to keep a family intact. But that's the thing no one tells you about starting over. You don't really start over. You start again, but you carry everything with you. The lessons, the scars, the strength. You rebuild, not from scratch, but from experience. And now, 2 years later, I see it all with clearer eyes. I see how strong I was to walk away, not just physically, but emotionally. I see the patterns I didn't notice before. I see how the silence in my marriage wasn't peaceful. It was permission. Permission for disrespect. Permission for resentment. Permission to ignore what was breaking. And I see now that choosing peace for myself also brought peace to my son. He's a happy little boy, curious, sensitive. He loves music and bedtime stories and insists on the same blanket every night. He doesn't remember the tension in the old house. He only remembers love. Because that's all I give him now. He has 2 homes. One with me, one with James. And while it's not the life I envisioned, it's one I'm proud of. Because I built it with intention, with grace, with boundaries. And, most importantly, with honesty. Honesty was the thing that changed everything. Once I stopped pretending I was okay, once I let go of what people thought I should do, I could finally see what I needed to do. I no longer exist to make other people comfortable. I exist to be true. For myself. For my son. And that honesty, quiet and steady, began to change my relationships too. James and I don't argue anymore. We communicate with clarity and kindness, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. We're not friends, but we are respectful partners in raising a child. And that, I think, is its own form of peace. As for Lily and Max, well, time has softened the sharp edges. We're not a picture-perfect blended family. We never were. But we've found a rhythm. Mutual respect. Quiet understanding. I no longer try to be their mother. I simply show up calm, consistent, open. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's not. But I no longer take their resistance personally. Because I know now. They were never rejecting me. They were rejecting the change they didn't ask for. And that's okay. They're teenagers now. Complicated, funny, guarded. But when they laugh in the kitchen or ask about their brother's school project or send a text just saying thanks, I take those as small miracles. Not the kind with fireworks, but the kind that whisper, "You did okay." And I believe that now. For a long time, I wondered if I'd ever stop feeling like a failure. I thought the end of a marriage meant the end of me. But it didn't. It was the beginning of someone I had never let myself become. Someone whole. Not perfect, but whole. I've learned that healing isn't linear. There are still days when the past sneaks up on me, when I remember an old argument or hear a song that played during simpler times or see a family at the park and wonder what if. That's normal. That's human. But those thoughts don't control me anymore. They pass through, like weather, and I no longer build houses in the storms. I also learned to forgive. Not for them, but for me. I forgave James, not because he apologized perfectly or made up for the past, but because I didn't want to carry the weight of resentment any longer. I forgave his silence, his blindness, his failure to protect me from harm inside his own home. And I forgave myself for staying too long, for hoping too hard, for sacrificing too much. Forgiveness isn't a one-time act. It's a practice. And some days, it takes work. But that work sets you free. And in that freedom, I found joy again. Real joy, not performative happiness, not the smile you paint on joy, but deep, nourishing, honest joy. I find it in quiet mornings with coffee on the porch, in my son's sleepy voice, asking for just one more story, in the pages of a book that remind me I'm still learning, in friendships that go deeper now, richer, more real, in long drives with the windows down and the music up, in peace. I no longer rush love. I no longer chase validation. I no longer contort myself to fit someone else's idea of enough. Instead, I trust. I trust myself to walk away from what doesn't honor me. I trust time to do its work. I trust that endings aren't failures. And I trust that the love I give to myself, to my child, to this world, will always return in ways I never expected. And if you're listening to this, if you've been where I've been, if you're still there, I want you to hear me when I say this. You are not broken. You are not weak for leaving, or for staying until you had nothing left. You are not selfish for choosing peace, or clarity, or yourself. You are worthy of a love that shows up, a love that listens, a love that makes space for all of you, not just the parts that are easy to love. And if that love never came from them, it can still come from you, because the most important relationship you will ever have isn't with a partner, or a parent, or a child. It's with yourself. And when that relationship is strong, everything else, everything begins to grow from there. So let go of the timeline. Let go of the expectations. Let go of the shame. Hold on to your worth. Hold on to your truth. Hold on to the quiet strength that's carried you this far. You've already done the hardest part. You faced the truth. Now let the rest of your life honor that courage. And remember, sometimes the bravest thing we ever do is walk away, so we can walk towards something better. Did this story make you see a part of yourself? If it did, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and most importantly, subscribe to Family Story, My Husband, so you can hear more heartfelt family stories every week. Marriage isn't just a journey. It's a long story. And you are our companion on every page.